Hello and welcome to this special episode of Trump Watch. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Amid a 90-day pause on US President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs, India and the US have finalized the terms of reference for the first phase of a potential bilateral trade agreement. India is aiming to finalize a deal by fall or even before that. Virtual discussions between the two countries will begin this week, while in-person discussions are expected to start in the second half of May. India has said that it will pursue a path of trade liberalization with the United States. Both countries are aiming to achieve a bilateral trade deal worth $500 billion by 2030. Sources have told CNBC-TV18 that US Vice President Vance and NSA Mike Waltz are set to visit India on the 21st of April. Vance will hold bilateral meetings with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and other senior cabinet ministers. His visit is expected to create momentum for an early trade deal. Joining us right now to discuss this is Mukesh Aghi, President of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Mr. Aghi, thank you very much for joining us. So the virtual negotiations are happening this week. How hopeful are you of a trade deal before fall?
Well, the objective is to, as you mentioned, increase the trade between the two countries to $500 billion. And to achieve that objective, you need to remove what I call impediments such as tariffs between the two countries, non-tariff barriers between the two countries, and smooth on out the process. Both countries needs the trade deal. I think for Indian economy to grow to 7-8%, it needs to increase its exports. US, as it dealings with China, needs to find a partner which can basically leverages both domestic manufacturing, also partnership manufacturing with India itself. So I'm very optimistic that we will find a rightful solution in the near future.
Right. Mr. Aghi, we have been seeing greater imports of iPhones, electronic goods from India into the United States. Do you see, as a result of the high tariff policy vis-a-vis China, do you see deepening of supply chain relations with India, greater imports from India into the US in not just electronics and smartphones, but other products as well?
Absolutely, Parikshit. You have to understand there is a geopolitical alignment between the two countries, and both countries sees China as a stress point. But more important is you have economies where quite interlinked. And so you will see de-risking of supply chain coming in from China, Vietnam, and Cambodia, where Chinese companies have set up their own manufacturing. India becomes a true partner in every aspect for the current administration. So you will see increased exports. I think it's important to understand that we also need to change perception about India being called the tariff king by the president. So we have to go extra step to ensure that we are moving the right direction, making sure that the exports from India are moving in an accelerated fashion. But more important is India become integral part of the global supply chain, because the complex electronic equipments are not made in one country. They're made in multiple countries. So making sure that the transition of these goods coming in, going out is very, very smooth.
Right. Could you give us a sense of the pushback the US government is actually facing for the tariffs that it has imposed? Yes, the reciprocal tariffs have been put on hold, but the baseline tariffs are still there. The high tariffs on China are still in place, and China has said that anything beyond this will now become a joke.
Yes, I think China is pushing back. They have basically stopped some of the critical minerals to the United States. They announced today they will stop buying Boeing planes from the United States. And China was almost a 20% market for Boeing planes itself. So we will see pushbacks. But you have to understand, all this was calculated in the thinking of the current administration, that we will have a pushback from China. And I think that's actually a positive news from India. India can step in and say, listen, we can fill in some of the void which China is going to create. So yes, you will see a much more stressful environment between China and the United States. And we do see a much more friendly environment between India and the United States. If you look at, both countries have taken a different approach dealing with the tariff issues. China has taken a very confrontational approach. And India has taken a much more conciliatory approach, trying to find a solution which is win-win for both countries. So I believe that the trade, the partnership between the two countries will move in the positive direction.
Right. What's your sense of the current trade negotiations? Where do you think there are points of agreement right now? And what percentage of the product lines have been agreed upon by the two countries? What's your sense on the negotiations?
Well, overall, it was announced yesterday, at least from a reference point, they've agreed on the framework. And to me, that's important. Now you will get into nuts and bolts, looking at every aspect of exports from India, exports from the United States. And so I believe that's where devil lies in the details itself. Yes, there'll be a point of disagreements because you have to protect local interests, and this is for both United States and India. But the intent and the attitude is that let's find a solution. I think that's, to me, that's more important than dealing with nuts and bolts itself. When you have two leaders of the country saying, hey, we'll find a solution, when you have trade negotiator announcing that they will find a solution, I believe you will see a win-win value proposition coming in. Yes, you can't please all parties on both sides of the countries itself, but I think it's important that we conclude an early trade agreement, which will set an example to the rest of the world that if there is intent on part of India and the United States, you will find a solution which is good for both countries.
Right. The other question that we'd also like to ask you, are you expecting this trade deal to be signed in tranches? Possibly, for example, today the Commerce Ministry has said that the framework for this deal, for the bilateral trade agreement, has been finalized. The contours are clear, but do you expect maybe phase one to be announced in the next 3 months?
I think it will be not prudent to give a timeline for announcement because it puts undue pressures on negotiators or on both sides. I think it is important you find the right solution if it takes 3 months or 4 months. But we do have what I call is a potential to wrap up the deal sometime by fall because we're expecting President Trump to come to India for the Quad Summit. And I think it'll be good to be announced during that time. It is, again, important that, yes, boundaries have been set up when Prime Minister visited the President early part of this year, and they agreed that they will try to conclude some kind of a trade agreement by fall. So I think both sides understand those timelines, and they will work towards that. The momentum is there. You have to understand, in earnest, right after Prime Minister's visit, both sides got down and started working on. You have to also understand that the framework reference which have been announced was not there. India and US have been negotiating trade deal for the last 10 years. We've been negotiating, India has been negotiating trade with Europe for the last 20 years itself. So what we are seeing is a genuine intent on part of government of India and the United States to come to a conclusion in an expedited manner.
Right. Now, speaking about manufacturing, are there certain areas where USISPF and industry chambers like yours are asking for a lowering of non-tariff barriers? This seems to be a major issue in negotiations right now. And which would be some of those top 2 or 3 non-tariff barriers which you would seek removal of or easing?
Well, on both sides, the agriculture is a red line. U.S. subsidizes farmers tremendously, and so does India. And you have to understand, for India, when you have 50% of the labor working on the farmland which contributes only 15% of the GDP, that's subsistence farming. And I think India has to protect that. So in the discussions, it has been made it very clear that substance like products like maize, rice, wheat are red lines. So is the issue from the United States also. I mean, so U.S. subsidizes is farmers. It gives 100% insurance on crop production itself. So I think both sides understand, and both sides have stayed away from some of the critical, sensitive issues, respecting the need of both countries. So from a tariff barrier perspective, agriculture, dairy will be a critical issue. I think non-tariff barriers, the regulations, is critical. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity from the government to basically deregulate some of the economy. For example, the standard bureaus have set up standards for everything which comes in, which is part of the critical supply chain. And I do recall almost 2 years ago, they only were looking at 100 items. Now it's 800 items. What we're doing is basically making it more and more difficult for global supply chain to move into India and be part of the complex product itself. So you will see more discussion happening on non-tariff barriers than tariff itself, because that's where the issue lies.
Right. Mr. Aghi, my final question to you would be, do you get a sense that tariffs on agriculture and dairy could be left aside out of the BTA in order to conclude it? Because this is a red line, as you said, for Indian farmers, the Indian government and the US government as well. And this has been the stand for many years now. So is it possible that the two sides may go ahead with a trade deal without agriculture and dairy?
I believe so. I think you will find some items both sides will put in because, for example, India does not have genetically modified goods in the country, which is understandable. And I think the US respects that. At the same time, India may say, listen, we'll bring in more pecans and almonds and bourbons into the country itself. So you will see give and take happening on both sides. But at the same time, US and India do understand that agriculture is critical for both economies, both countries, from a national security perspective. And so let's not go into that. And so the sense I'm getting at least is respect each other's red lines and work around that area to conclude a trade deal.
Great. Mr. Aghi, thank you very much for joining us. So you're saying that non-tariff barriers are currently more important than the tariff barriers, and it's possible for the two countries to go ahead with a BTA without going to the red lines on agriculture and dairy. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. It's time for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. Coming up on the other side, US President Donald Trump says tariffs on chips and pharmaceuticals are coming soon. We will delve into what this means for India when we return.